She said it in the kitchen, not loud, not angry, like she was correcting a receipt. She said a man doesn't deserve intimacy just for paying bills. She said it while rinsing a plate, her back turned, water running, like the sentence didn't need a face. I stood there with my boots still on, the smell of metal and oil clinging to me from the plant, and the house felt suddenly rented, not owned. Earlier that evening the grill had still been warm in the backyard. The game was on, beer bottles sweating on the table, and Marcus was laughing too loud at something I didn't hear. He had been around a lot lately. College friend. 12 years. Fishing trips. Sunday games. The kind of guy you hand a spare key to without thinking. When I left for my night shift, he stayed behind to help carry groceries. That part didn't register then. In the kitchen, after her sentence landed, nothing followed. No argument. No explanation. I nodded once, like she'd told me the trash day changed. I walked past her and into the hallway. The light over the guest room was still on from when my dad used to stay there. I flipped it off and kept going. Later, she tried to talk like nothing happened. She asked if I'd eaten. I said I was fine. She asked about work. I said it was the same. I paused the talking right there. That night, I slept alone without announcing it. In the morning, the house learned a new sound, quiet that stayed. The quiet didn't scare her at first. She treated it like a mood, something temporary. She moved through the house louder than usual, cabinets closing harder, the TV turned up a notch. I moved around her without contact. Ate after she finished. Showered after she slept. The guest room became my address. Marcus still showed up. Not as often, but enough. He knocked once in the afternoon, holding a six-pack like a peace offering. She let him in before I reached the door. I stayed seated. The game played. Their voices carried from the living room. Casual, familiar, like nothing had shifted. When he laughed, she laughed faster. When I stood up to leave the room, they both paused for half a second too long. Later that evening, I stepped into her car to grab my gloves from the console. The door pocket was stuffed with receipts and lip balm and folded papers. One slip slid onto the seat. Cheap paper. Red logo. I didn't sit down. I picked it up and read it standing there. A motel off the highway. A date that matched a night shift I remembered clearly because a pipe burst and we stayed late. I folded the receipt back the way it had been and put it where I found it. Inside the house, she was on the couch texting, smiling at her phone. I walked past her and opened the fridge. I cooked for one. She asked if something was wrong. I said I was tired. That was the last full sentence she got from me that week. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't take photos or screenshot anything. I let the house keep moving while I adjusted my angle inside it. In the mornings, she left early for the clinic. Her car stayed in the driveway longer than usual on some evenings. I started parking my truck on the street, not the drive. It made it easier to see who came and went without being seen myself. The receipt wasn't alone for long. A charge showed up on the card I rarely checked because it always stayed boring. Same motel name. Same stretch of highway. Different afternoon. I didn't call the bank. I didn't freeze anything yet. I just memorized the pattern. Nights I was on shift. Afternoons, she said she stayed late. Evenings, Marcus stopped coming over and started texting instead. At home, I changed my routines without announcing it. My clothes moved to the guest room closet. My toothbrush followed. I cooked simple meals and packed leftovers she never touched because they weren't for her. When she asked why I felt distant, I shrugged and walked past her. When Marcus texted asking about fishing plans, I didn't answer. He sent another message 2 days later. Still nothing. She began watching me more closely. Her questions slowed down, like she was testing each one before letting it out. I gave her nothing back. My face stayed flat. My voice stayed level. The house stopped feeling like a shared place and started acting like neutral ground. At night, when the lights were off, her phone screen still glowed. I faced the wall and let the silence finish what the receipt had started. She tested the silence the way people test ice, pressing lightly at first. She asked practical questions. Whether I'd be home for dinner. Whether I wanted groceries. Whether I was working overtime. I answered with nods or single words and kept moving. I stopped sharing schedules. I stopped syncing anything. My phone stayed face down. One morning, she brought up money. She said it casually, leaning against the counter, scrolling while she talked. She said bills didn't buy closeness. She said intimacy wasn't transactional. She said it like it was a lesson she'd practiced. I listened without reacting. I rinsed my mug and left the room. The next day, I made a few quiet changes. I didn't announce them. I didn't explain them. Her extra card stopped working. The subscriptions tied to my account paused one by one. The house didn't lose power. The water kept running. The mortgage was already paid. Only the comforts she never questioned went dark. That evening, she stood in the living room holding her phone, refreshing apps like it was a signal problem. She asked if something was wrong with the bank. I said I hadn't noticed anything. I went to the guest room and shut the door. Marcus stopped coming by entirely. His truck didn't pass anymore. His messages stayed unread. When friends asked how we were doing, I said we were taking space. I didn't add details. At home, I became harder to track. I ate at odd times, left early, came back late. I was still there, but no longer available. The house adjusted around me like I was already gone. The fallout didn't start with me raising my voice. It started with me removing myself from the picture. Marcus noticed first. I could tell by the way mutual friends stopped bringing him up, like his name had become inconvenient. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't accuse him. I just stopped being the bridge that made his world comfortable. At the plant, schedules changed, and I took extra shifts without telling anyone at home. My truck stayed parked away from the house when I was there. I didn't show up to the fishing trip we'd talked about for months. I didn't answer the group chat when his jokes landed flat. Silence has weight when it replaces familiarity. Information moves fast when you stop blocking it. A friend mentioned Marcus was having trouble at work, something about a client complaint that went higher than it should have. Another mentioned his ex was back in the picture, asking questions. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I let things unfold without touching them. At home, she sensed the shift but couldn't locate it. She hovered more, cleaned spaces that were already clean, asked about plans I no longer shared. When she mentioned Marcus once, casually, I didn't react at all. Not even a pause. The name fell flat in the room. That night, I came home late and went straight to the guest room. She stood in the hallway, watching me like she was trying to recognize someone she used to know. I closed the door without looking back. Whatever was unraveling out there no longer required my involvement. The shift became visible outside the house first. At a small family gathering, she tried to slide back into routine, smiling too quickly, touching my arm like muscle memory. I didn't move. I stood with a drink I didn't finish and listened more than I spoke. When someone asked how things were going, I answered with the same line every time. We were taking space. No edge. No emotion. Just distance. People adjusted to that sentence faster than she expected. Conversations rerouted around her. Invitations stopped coming directly. A friend's wife asked her a question and then glanced at me, like she was checking for permission that never came. I stayed neutral. I stayed quiet. The silence did the sorting. At work events, she showed up alone and left early. She started checking her phone more often, scanning the room like she was missing a cue everyone else had heard. Marcus wasn't there anymore. His absence sat heavier than any accusation. No one mentioned his name. No one needed to. Back at home, she tried to recover ground by being useful. She cooked meals I didn't touch. She folded laundry that wasn't mine. She waited up in the living room, lights low, like the setting might soften me. I walked past her and went to the guest room. The house began treating her differently too. Rooms echoed longer when she spoke. Doors closed without announcement. I wasn't punishing her. I wasn't teaching a lesson. I was simply no longer participating. And without my presence to anchor things, her world started slipping out of alignment in ways she couldn't stop. The house didn't argue with her anymore. It just stopped responding. She moved from room to room like she was checking inventory, opening doors that led nowhere useful. I watched from the edges, present without engaging. I came home, changed, ate, slept. All of it happened without crossing her path. She started reaching outward. Long calls in the evenings that ended with her staring at the wall. Messages sent and unsent. I heard her pacing at night, the floorboards mapping her restlessness. In the mornings, she looked tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. She dressed carefully anyway, like appearance might restore balance. One afternoon, she tried sitting across from me at the table. She placed her phone face down, a deliberate gesture. She waited. I finished my meal and rinsed my plate. When I turned to leave, she asked why I wouldn't look at her anymore. I paused long enough to make the question feel heavier, then kept walking. Words would have given her something to hold on to. Marcus vanished from her orbit completely. No visits. No calls that reached her. Whatever comfort she thought was there had closed its door. Friends stopped checking in. Even her mother's messages slowed, polite but distant. I stayed steady. I worked. I slept. I kept my routines tight and my presence minimal. I was still in the house, still paying what needed paying, still moving forward. She lived beside me, but the space between us had hardened into something solid, something she couldn't cross without my permission. She chose the evening when I was packing my lunch for the next day. The kitchen was quiet, lights too bright, every sound sharp. She stood across from me longer than usual, waiting for acknowledgement that didn't come. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier than her hands. She asked when we became strangers. She asked what she had done to deserve being erased inside her own house. She asked why I could look through her like she wasn't there. I kept moving, sealing the container, wiping the counter clean. She stepped closer, blocking my path. She said this wasn't normal. She said couples talked. She said silence was cruel. I looked at her then, really looked, for the first time in weeks. Her face searched mine for something familiar and didn't find it. I told her that strangers don't share access. I told her that strangers don't lean on accounts they didn't earn. I told her that strangers don't get explanations. My voice stayed level. No accusation. No details. Just facts, delivered without heat. She asked if this was about someone else. I didn't answer. She asked if it was about Marcus. I didn't react. The name hit the air and dropped. She waited for impact that never came. I picked up my bag and walked past her. She didn't follow. The hallway swallowed my footsteps. Behind me, the kitchen stayed exactly as it was, like a scene after the actors leave. For the first time, she understood that whatever we had been before was no longer available for discussion. The collapse didn't come with noise. It came with delays. Missed payments she hadn't planned for. Awkward conversations at work when her focus slipped and someone else noticed. Invitations that never arrived. She started spending more time at home, not because she wanted to, but because there was nowhere else that still felt accessible. She moved through the house carefully now, like the walls might react. She stopped touching my things entirely. The guest room door stayed closed. When I passed her in the hallway, she pressed herself flat against the wall, giving me space she hadn't offered before. The shift was visible in her posture, in the way her voice dropped when she spoke to anyone on the phone. Marcus didn't reappear. Whatever had existed between them had burned out fast once it required daylight. She checked her phone often, then less, then not at all. One evening, I heard her crying in the bathroom with the fan on. I didn't change my routine. I finished my meal and went to bed. At work, I took on more responsibility. Longer stretches. Fewer gaps. My life narrowed and sharpened. Hers unraveled in small, relentless ways. She forgot appointments. Left lights on. Started conversations and lost track of them halfway through. We lived under the same roof, but the distance between us had turned structural. She wasn't waiting for me to come back anymore. She was realizing I already had left, just without packing a box or slamming a door. And there was nothing left she could offer that I hadn't already learned to live without. She waited until the house was quiet, until the evening settled into its usual shape. I was at the table, finishing paperwork for a shift change, when she stood in the doorway like she had something fragile to deliver. She didn't cry this time. She didn't raise her voice. She asked why I was treating her like a stranger, like the words had finally lined up in the right order. I looked at her long enough for the answer to register before it landed. I told her that strangers don't share space the way we used to. I told her that strangers don't get access by habit. I told her that I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. She nodded like she understood, even if she didn't agree. She asked what happened to us. I didn't revisit the past. I didn't name names. I told her what remained was what she was standing in now. Silence. Distance. Clear lines. I stood up and carried my papers to the guest room. I closed the door and locked it for the first time. In the morning, the house would run the same. Bills that mattered would be paid. Work would continue. My life would move forward without negotiation. She stayed in the kitchen, alone with the echo of her question. There was no scene left to play out. No final argument waiting. Just the reality of two people under one roof, separated by choice. I didn't leave the house that night. I didn't need to. I had already left the role she wanted me to keep.